welcome to tonight's Hot Topics episode. If you joined us last week, you'll know that this is part 2 of our How Far is Too Far episode as we discuss sex, marriage, couples, and cuddles between these couples. And so we'd like to invite you to, firstly, if you haven't watched this last week's episode, please do go and watch part 1. It really will help you follow along with tonight's conversation. But if you have, we would like to invite you just to have a look at tonight's episode. There is really a lot to learn as we engage this topic a little bit deeper tonight and carry on with the question of how far is too far. So before we jump into tonight's episode, we've got a couple of questions that we've asked some people to find out what they think about this issue. So let's have a look together.
I mean, it's always a matter of communication. So if you communicate your needs and your wants to the person and be clear where is too far, and you can't compromise on which thing. Yeah, for me, communication is key because of sometimes you find out that to me it's normal, but to you it's foreign. So you have to communicate that.
I think it's very important when you get into a relationship to set boundaries, because then you don't open yourself up for expectations on another person's side that you're not then able to meet at a later point, to sort of like avoid any challenges or fights that may come up because of lack of explaining where your boundaries are.
I think it depends on the couple. So I normally ask the question, what would Jesus say amen to? So if you're kind of sitting there and you have a line, so you fully know what's right for you or what's wrong for you. If you kind of considering doing something with a person that you're not married to, if you're able to take a step back and ask, would Jesus say amen to this? If it's a no, then it's probably a no. It's probably too far.
I should feel comfortable in any situation in that relationship.
The way I've agreed with my girlfriend to set boundaries is to talk about it, and to talk about it before it happens. I think talking about what you want to do and what you don't want to do is something that's very important to do before you're in the act of doing it. Like, don't make the decision to do something in the heat of the moment, because your emotions are overriding what your actual thoughts and what your actual motives are based on. Like, I think just talking with your partner.
Yes, my first serious relationship, we had boundaries, and he respected the boundaries, I respected the boundaries, and when there were spaces that we knew that, those boundaries, they had a chance of being broken, so we tried our best to not go too far in that space, but still, trying to still have fun. But so I did have a relationship. It worked quite well, so we dated for about 18 months. And we never went too far.
At the first stage, there's like a talking stage, and then there are a few stages that are going to come after that. But at the talking stage, that's the most important factor of the relationship. You must talk with your partner, tell them that I want this, I don't want this. Even when you're busy kissing, the partner will just push you away and say, you said you don't want this.
And it's again, bringing it back to this conversation is the wisdom around speaking about these things, but also it's not about saying, don't do this. It's about saying, it's my body. I get to say what goes, but also to say, what is the wisdom in what I do with my body? And I think that applies to older children, not just to their age.
Sure. And I could imagine, so one thing I know is as Prof, you are very big on the idea of the family as a hermeneutic sphere, as the natural place of learning, but because of the language that we use when it comes to sexual behavior, because no one wants to speak about it, but also because of cultural displacement, where, for instance, I wanted to add in when you were having a conversation with Annela that it's actually not only it's actually not a Christian doctrine, the idea of having responsible sex within a responsible setup, that even in our cultures, it is actually a cultural teaching, that you wait up until you are in a setting that allows you and enables responsible sexual intercourse. You know? Now, what I then want to come to is, because of cultural displacement, because of the language that we've used in the church, because we've shamed people, and because we do not want to call things for what they are, a mistake that we then make is that we have taken away safe spaces where values can be cultivated around how we engage in sexual behavior. And for instance, if a young girl finds herself in a compromised position because she said she was going to go to third base, she was not going anywhere beyond that, and then the boy actually, or the girl actually goes even a step further, they can't even open up to their parents because of the shame that is attached to it.
True.
How can we deal with this? You know, I just want to hear, what is your heart, what is your mind around this?
If I may start, I think the most traumatizing word my mom ever said to me, and I think I was in my late 20s. My mom is a pastor. My father reads the Bible every day. We never spoke about sex, ever. Nothing. It was only when you are going to get married will we engage in that. So I was in the choir, and the boys are in the choir, and the girls, and they were kissing behind corners, because that's all we did. Mondays church, Thursdays church, Fridays church. So the only social time we had was at church. And I learned a lot of stuff in church, behind corners. And I was like, but why? Firstly, our parents, obviously, they keep us to this space, but this whole thing of not communicating and not calling thing a thing, it led to me seeing a lot of children that really loved being in church disappear. I remember going, but every 2 weeks, someone was just falling off. Falling off and saying, nah, I'm okay with the whole church thing and being in the church. It's a tough conversation, because no matter how you put it, and no matter how we phrase it, and no matter how many years we're going to learn about it, it's an individual conversation that a person has to have with themselves. And it's a teaching that you can only really teach yourself. When young girls feel like coming to the church is going to be a judgmental place, it's because the teaching of how it's supposed to be safe was not done.
True.
You did not teach me as a pastor that, listen, if you have sexual urges, they're okay, and this is what sometimes they look like. If that happens to you, what do you want to do? And instead of feeling like you only come to church to fix a problem, like church is not the ER. And yes, it's supposed to be in part, but I've said, why do we only come to church when we've hit rock bottom? And then you see people eating grass, spraying doom in their faces, and you hear these stories that you're like, wait, you went to church just to look for a miracle, because you don't know how to pray and deal with yourself and your issues and your sexual issues as a family unit without that. So I think I may have steered off topic, because it's so complex. Sure. But all I'm going to say is, it is an individual thing. And the only way you will know what's happening with your young child is by asking the questions. But also, parents have to understand that they're incredibly intimidating. If your parent has never spoken to you about sex, and you are 18, and your father says, sit down, now, we're going to have the talk about, and you're already like, nope, you have shut down. You're like, it's not going to happen.
In fact, for me, when Apali says that, we're going back to what Hloni about culture and home as a hermeneutic space. In our families, there's no language to talk about sex, right? There are no tools to talk about sex, but chances are they may see it. I don't know if you're in your conversations, what do you do when you see your mom and dad having sex? I mean, I have a case of someone I'm working with who was exposed to sex, seeing his parents having sex when he was young, and they would thought that he's sleeping. He even reminded the sound of what that looked and sounded like. And now he's an adult who is very promiscuous. And it all began from one encounter of being exposed to that. Now, what happens in the moment when they catch you? It's either you had a moment, it's kind of whatever that you were doing, how do you then even start naming what we are doing? Right? So for me, it's the language in our culture, family, and all of that. And again, our parents are even ashamed to talk about sex. I mean, even in the Christian community, I don't know why is it so hard to talk about it? Because we do it. Right? And it's pleasurable, and everybody enjoys it. So why can't we talk about it? So at home, we don't talk about it, we do it. At home, we put a nice thing around it, and we don't get to the core essence of what this is. It's even worse now. When your queer child tells you that they are queer and then they are ready to have sex, that's even another conversation. A teenager that then says, Mommy, I'm gay or I'm lesbian, and I'm ready to have sex. Now there's a double bind. There's queerness, which is, we don't even have a language for it. Now there is sex. How do you have that kind of sex? So there are those kind of other things around that. And at home, again, it depends on the kind of relationship that is at home. But if my home, my understanding of everything as that I'm seeing, I see my mom having multiple partners, right? What will that say about sex and sexual development of that child?
Yeah, exactly.
So home is safe and unsafe. And it becomes even more when there is no language to talk about sex. My cousins love me because from as early as, like, guys, you have this is not a TT, it's a penis. And it does this. When a teenager becomes a teenager, when you have wet dreams, that's the feeling that usually happens. Now, later in life, this is what it translates to. But you're not yet at that stage. And it's so unfortunate we don't have theories that will then tell us, how do you disclose sex to a 6-year-old, to a 10-year-old, and all of those things. Well, we may know them, but hell no, my mother in the Transkei, to talk about this, how I came about to be in the world.
Absolutely.
All I know, I came from the plane.
True.
I came from a stalk.
Yeah, from a stalk.
And they forget to say, you are a product of pleasure, by the way.
Yeah.
Because it was nice.
No, I was Immaculate Conception.
I think our discussion just points one more time to the fact that we have let parents down. Nobody has ever helped them to do what we now know and agree, that the best way to learn how beautiful it is from your own mom and dad, and not many moms and dads are capable of doing so. May I add just one remark as to that beautiful text that I've quoted? There's one meaning there, that we may grow in love and insight, and in difficult translation, sensitivity, to discern the things that are really important. Now that love that we grow in is not meant kind of erotic life, love, sexual life. It is respect, that you may grow in respect for yourself and for one another, and in insight knowledge, and the two of them will create within you a deep sense of knowing, sensitivity. What is the best thing to do now? And that's what we do not help them with, because there comes a time that the sexual drive overrides any thinking. There's no way that they can sit down and say, what will be the consequences of this? So if it is not a built-in kind of protection, not prescriptive protection, but there are no prescriptions here, but a built-in kind of empowering them to at least think about it before I go to either base 1 or 2. Does it show respect for the other one or for myself? And can I think through the consequences? Because we all, as South Africans sitting here today, we know the disastrous consequences of becoming pregnant at 14. And no subsidy from no government can bring up a child. That's not the point. A child needs more than a subsidy to be brought up. So we are in serious trouble when it comes to our unpreparedness of caring for those beautiful youngsters out there in our own local churches. And we need to protect them by equipping them as much as we can, and their parents.
If I may, my last yapping on this is going to be, my 2-year-old and my 5-year-old really have taught me that I'm very different to my parents. My 5-year-old will say to me, Mommy, I don't like what you just said to me, and you really hurt my feelings. Now, when I was growing up, children are seen, not heard. And that's why the sex conversation, and I just connected it, was so hard because we were never having a two-way conversation when your children were growing up. It was a one-way directive conversation coming from the parent. So now if all the parent is doing is having a directive conversation, even the sex conversation becomes impossible because you have not listened to me since I was small. So when I look at my children and they'll say to me, even the 2-year-old, she'll say to me, Mommy, time out. Or I'll do something I said she mustn't do. I'll open the fridge and I'll drink juice and it's past 6 o'clock. She goes, no. Time out, Mommy. And I'm like, oh, Gonje, they are watching me. And then, but they're so expressive.
Absolutely.
I realize that it's so much easier and it's going to be a lot easier for me to talk about other things with them as they age. Because as a mom, I made a decision that obviously I want to better my parents' mistakes, but they speak already. What was the point of teaching them how to communicate with me if I don't let them exercise that? So having my kids communicate and always saying, no, Mommy, I don't like that. My child will come home, the 5-year-old, and say, Mommy, so-and-so is so naughty. You will not believe what they did. And then she'll go on to tell me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and what did you do? And she breaks down the story, but she's so aware that that's not what we do at home. And she can tell me, or I'll be like, oh, were you naughty today? She can communicate clearly. And I'm like, I hope and I pray that God continues to keep me talking and keep me listening. Because parents really struggle in listening to their kids. And the problem with listening is if your child only gets information from outside, you are not going to be understanding what they're saying because you don't speak outside's language. So if your child comes one day and they're like, skrik, and they're doing all these funny things that they see on TikTok, and you're like, this child is just yapping. Meanwhile, that child is telling you about a whole sexual experience, and you're just like, it's just those, you're not talking. And it means, how do we communicate more in the home? And maybe this is something, because I love providing solutions, because we can talk all we want, but we've got to provide practical solutions. We really do need to tell fathers and mothers and their children, you need to actually sit down and talk with your kids, and not in a setting like this. It's horrible, it's confined. It already feels like I'm in trouble. Go outside, go for walks, go wash the car together. Those are opportunities to listen. When your child says they have friends, you should have the friends over and the parents, so you see exactly who these people that interact and share the knowledge with. If you think about it, you leave your house at 6:30 in the morning and you only come back at 6:30. How many hours were you gone and who was raising your child in those hours? Because by the time you get home, you're too tired to actually do a lot of raising. So we do need to teach people how to make the time to communicate, so that no one else is communicating to your child in terms of those foundational things that they need to know. I think,
Hloni, I almost feel like I owe it to any young person listening now to just say that there is no single adult who haven't made stupid mistakes when it comes to our sexuality. We haven't really made it. We have made stupid mistakes. But that's the difference between us and an animal. An animal cannot say no to sex, but we can learn to control our drives to the point that it doesn't harm ourselves and other human beings. So we owe each other that respect, and that's what we learn from our parents. Even when they do not talk to us about sex. Mine didn't. I was even brought up before Palesa. Even more, no talk about that, you just do it. But they learned me respect for another human being.
Sorry, Prof, maybe another thing that I'm thinking as you're talking around, because you mentioned something about control and regulation of this pleasure in a safe space and all of that. Then now, my child then says, Mommy or Daddy, is it safe to masturbate for that preservation until I get to the safe space? Because it's about relief of that pleasure and desire.
Absolutely.
So do we have alternatives that we say, okay, then you can wait, my child, until you're at the right age, then now you can probably, okay, the usual age is 18, but now they said, in the moment, what do I do with,
with my
this,
desires.
with my desire?
Exactly.
How do we control
Yeah,
that? For me, that's another thing to say. Again, are we open to having masturbation as a conversation?
Absolutely.
Right?
I'm not having
So-
this conversation. I will be bringing my children to church.
So those are the kind of things, Tony, for
This
me.
is
that-
literally the point where I do this.
Right. Yeah, because really, how do I keep this? 'Cause
Exactly.
I mean, desire is like when you desire something. When
Exactly,
you, I mean,
true.
even for an adult,
True.
when you've got sexual urges.
But even with masturbation, our teaching as church is not to say, yeah, you're going to hell like they did in many, many years, or you will go blind, that kind of thing. But to help them understand that even that, it's a desire that has to be regulated for the benefit of the human being. And I am God's person, you've said it. My body belongs to myself and the God who gave it to me. That's what the Bible means by calling my body a temple. So there is also there kind of the beautiful word in Afrikaans, the fruit of the Spirit is self-beheersing, controlling the self so that you do not harm yourself. So if you sit there the whole day, I will be very blunt now, masturbating, that's as sick.
Oh yeah,
as it
psychologically
is,
as well.
Exactly,
It's-
too, of
yes.
course. And you have probably worked with people who are sexually captured, kind of, almost verslaafd in some kind of thing. So even then, our help to young people is to live whatever life they live to the fullest, but to live it under the control of the Holy Spirit, our living God, Jesus Christ. That makes life worth living.
The last
Whatever.
point, sorry, Pastor, the last point under the Holy Spirit, for someone like me and others who may not necessarily be so much entrenched in that belief or theology of managing that within that perspective, there I am sitting with a child, probably your child, but is coming to me like, Anele, I feel I'm ready to masturbate, but my mom is not ready for that or whatever.
Yeah.
How do we think of these kind of conversations beyond biblical lenses or theological lenses? But I'm speaking now as a psychologist, that these are
I
some of
understand.
my day-to-day realities that I am very understanding that pornography has got its own impact, but there can be something that can be taken out of it. Sex, anything that has desire and pleasure, it's so difficult to regulate and manage it. But I hear when you say, as much as you have a right and consent to your body, that this is self-pleasure, how do we talk about giving yourself that permission when and how? That's where my thing is. They say, because I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not doing anything wrong to anyone. I'm pleasuring myself when I feel like it, because at the end of the day, I may be preserving myself for this something great. But in the moment, how do I regulate that which I want to pleasure myself with?
Well, if I may just, it's such an interesting discussion, but if I may just rephrase the second commandment for a moment. Respect others as you respect yourself. We learn Christians guidelines to live with, and we learn from the Christ how to live life. So there's no prescription, but there are guidelines. That is your decision. If that is your decision, I have to respect that. I may disagree with the way people live their sexuality out, but it's not for me to judge that. But when we talk, we can talk about what is, I know it's a difficult concept, but what is healthy here? What is healthy living here? And that implies to everything. I mean, you can be addicted to a cell phone. Is it sin? No. Is it healthy? Yeah, that's a different question. Is it respectful? Say, for instance, one of us would have been sitting here with our cell phone, every moment checking our whatever. Is it sin? No. Is it respectful? No. So respect for myself as a human being created by the living God is our business, without judging people who are different. than us. But we are talking today as a group of Christians, talking to Christian young people, seeking guidelines for how far is too far. And no one can prescribe that. It is ultimately a sensitive conscience. I think I went too far today and then my friend called it good mistakes. But in the development of sexuality and sexual privileges, there are often disastrous mistakes.
Well, at the end of the day, you have to follow your peace. So if you realize that this person is not willing to meet you halfway or to compromise, then I say follow your peace. Get out while you still can. Because sometimes being toxic messes you up.
Sure. So yes, there were boundaries, and I think it comes down to respect and communication. So having a very clear and mutual understanding of what is okay for you or what's okay or not okay for the other person, and really just focusing in on that and keeping that in mind just under normal circumstances.
And how would you respond to a situation where someone is trying to break those boundaries?
To respect your yes or your no, then maybe they're not ready for you and for who you are.
Go back to the drawing board and communicate. Communicate that this is where we were, this is why we agreed that we are going to be here. And now I am noticing that you are about to break boundaries, or you are trying to break boundaries. Get an understanding as to why this person is willing to break the boundaries after they've been set, and that's where you then understand where they are coming from, and then remind them of why you are there in the first place. Because ultimately communication helps a lot, and it would even assist that when this conversation is had, it is had in confidence.
The way I would react is to have enough willpower to stop them. I think as long as you are both have agreed to, if you stop each other, you don't, as I say, feel bad about it, or don't hold it against the other person. But if you need to have the willpower to say no, and to just think about what you're doing. I know it will be hard, but think about what you're doing as you're doing it, and don't think about what you've done after you've done it.
One person should respect another. If I say no, then it means no. And I think that my partner or the person that I'm with should respect that.
Boundaries, walk away. Definitely don't stick around.
A conversation about it and tell me what that person, whether what she likes or what she does not like, and whether or not each one another's like boundary ever clash in any way. That way we could try and sort it out or create new boundaries where they will never actually clash with one another.
When I don't like, I'm gonna call you out on it. If that would be happening and I'm here, if it seems like I'm allowing you to do that, my mind naturally tells me, just stop it now, because things are just gonna get out of hand. I would get up and just say, didn't we talk about this? Or is this just you thinking that your own things? Because we spoke about it and that's not. If you feel like this is gonna happen continuously, or I'm gonna at one point just give in, it's not gonna happen.
Sexuality is a very nuanced topic, and we could literally go on the entire week, about it. But these conversations are some of our inspirations as we draw on future topics that can be explored. But the beauty of hot topics, and when I actually invited Prof, the first thing that I really thought about is that it is almost like sitting around the fire with an elder with our inquiring minds, and we continue to ask questions as we wrestle. And I hope that at home we will also develop the same space where young people can continually ask questions and inquire more and more. And so as we close off, I'll just give a round to everyone, just 30 seconds briefly if you'd like to say anything, if you'd like to share anything around the topic. But Lisa, I really hope that you will say something also just around how it distorts our understanding of respecting the next person, and just how parents can use this as an opportunity to actually teach young boys to respect, or even young girls to respect the significant other.
Thank you. I think when you break it down to, if we start with young men and young women, I think it's very important, firstly, to teach young men, like Prof said, respect. Being able to respect the next person does not mean that you are not going to get your respect. It's very important to say, if you want to speak to someone, you speak respectfully. If you want something, but it's foundational teaching. You can't just start respect as a topic per topic. You can't say, we're only going to start talking about respecting as it applies to sex. It is respectful to us for sweets. It is respectful to us to go out. You don't just do as you want. If you live with your parents, respecting your parents, because you're creating boundaries and you are conditioning respect in your child. You can't just let your child just do whatever. But you must understand that you're teaching them respect for a bigger purpose. With young women, I believe that understanding that consent is not what you can do to me, but what I am comfortable in doing. And that leads you to the questioning of, why am I comfortable in doing this? You see, for me as a young woman, when I decided to engage in, sexual activities, I said, okay, why? Why? And I went to my pastor and was like, okay, I think I'm ready now. And he was like, why? And I was like, good question. And I couldn't answer. But I thought I was ready. But I could not answer why. And he was like, do me a favor. Read your Bible. Look for all the chapters. Do everything you need to do. And then come back and tell me, like, I will bless you and I will walk you through it. I held off for like another 2 years. Because I was like, I still can't answer that question. And for me, it was the open communication that we continuously have. When there is no respect or consent, young men, as you look at the stats of gender-based violence, as we specifically speak of rape and sexual assault, it is because you think that you own the next person. So you see, you have no respect for that woman or her body. You just know that I'm going to take, and I want my pleasure. And whatever I want, it must be given by somebody that has nothing to do with me. So respect, like Prof said, it's so important teaching young men respect. And as young women, I always do say, with the campaign that I do, identifying potential situations is very important. If you hang around somebody that continuously wants to have you intoxicated, why? Alcohol lowers your ability to be focused and understand what's happening around you. Ask yourself, the people that you hang out with, do they want to do healthy activities? And we mean healthy activities. Do they want to hike? Do they want to hang out as groups? It doesn't have to be so overly Christian and hovering over you. But be careful of the people you hang out with and the situations that they're putting you in. If you ever feel unsafe, and one of the things we teach the women is your gut feeling. And I was taught this very young. That's my Holy Spirit. It's not just the gut. It is someone letting my whole body know that we shouldn't be here. We're feeling uncomfortable. You don't know what it is, but something is letting you know that we are now trying to teach women at the age of 35 to 40 how to go back to listening to that intuition. So I think it is an interpersonal conversation, but I do think things that I appreciate are stuff like journaling. Being able to, by yourself, just really write down certain things that you want to do and certain things you're experiencing. The ability to read back on them gives you more understanding into yourself. So, yes.
Thank you so much. Ilse, do you want to close off for us?
Thanks. I think just thank you, Ilse, as well, for giving us some practical ideas on what we can do to reflect. And Prof and Anela, you've really given us a lot to think about today. I think this conversation has exceeded what we hoped for. And I hope that this will be how it's received by our youth, that we are not just drawing a line in the sand and saying up to here, but that we found a way to journey together, to negotiate this together. So thank you for this conversation. And so everyone, I just want to invite you to join us for our Tuesday night chats this week that's coming up. We'll be unpacking this conversation a little bit more, discussing this coming Tuesday at 7:30 in the evening as we unpack and discover what this means for us. And so we wish you a blessed week this week, and we hope we will see you for the next episode of this series as well.